Welcome to this Cambridge Marketing College webinar. The topic today is resilience and adaptability in modern marketing roles. And let's face it, I think all of us could do with a little of that. My name's Neil Wilkins. I'm one of the tutors at the college. So, this is going to be all about how to stay and remain effective, confident, and I guess you could say commercially useful during periods of chaos, during change, and also uncertainty. And there is a lot of that happening right now across all markets, across all countries. So think about really when you've been most stretched in the role that you have, whether you're in a junior role, a senior role, whether you're just moving into marketing or you've been in the role for quite some time. I think we can all reflect on this and find pockets of time, particular time when things just required a little bit more from us. And those will be some of the things that we're going to pick up in this session here today. And our roles are changing very, very quickly. I mean, change is inevitable. No matter what you do, no matter what your job description is, your objectives are, things are changing very, very fast. I mean, we've got the advent, obviously, now of AI. We've got tight budgets, budgets being reduced, I guess, in many, many areas. There is a real complexity and an ever-evolving channel mix if you're in marketing communications, and a lot of shifting expectations in many ways, things that are expected of us and of marketing more generally. And this puts an increasing pressure on all of us. It really does. There are kind of pockets of best practice, and that's what we're going to go into in this session here and identify actually what resilience really is, the benefits of being flexible and agile as this inevitable change plays out in front of us and can potentially impact on us. It's no longer a nice to have. This is something that is really, at the core of everything that we would call modern professional capability. Obviously, it doesn't just apply to marketing, but we very much feel this, I guess, in the kind of role that we perform in most businesses. So by the end of this session, I'm hoping you are going to feel a lot more resilient and adaptable and very much welcoming of change, this inevitability in what we face. So we're going to understand what actually resilience and adaptability is, particularly in a marketing context. And we're going to look at some of the proven models to give us a number of choices. I mean, you don't have to do this, but in terms of taking the choices consciously to respond to change in a more effective way is very, very positive. We're going to look at recognizing some of the pressure signs that may be there before they become really impactful on us. Again, that's key. Spotting this stuff early in the game is a really, really great way of then being able to manage it and being able to cope. We're going to hopefully start to build some practical habits that will enable you to do this sustainably. So not just straight after us talking about this here today, but actually as an ongoing thing that becomes part of you. It becomes a preference and a way of being that you have that will enable you to be more effective and actually enjoy more what you're actually doing. And then hopefully then being able to support others because it is you, it is you. And what do they say? Always put on your oxygen mask before helping others when you're on a flight. And it is about saving yourself first, looking after number one first to enable you to have the energy and the insight and the power, if you like, to be capable of then supporting others. And that can be supporting upwards as well as downwards in the organization. It's not all about, well, I don't have any direct reports, so that doesn't apply to me. This is actually about being just a good kind of corporate citizen, being a good person to work with, just a great supportive colleague, because everybody is going through something. And I'm sure we can all kind of recognize that. So let's begin with what resilience really is. Okay, this is not about just kind of, gritting your teeth, clenching your fists and saying, right, I'm just going to power through this. And it isn't about pretending that everything is fine. This is about recognizing, accepting, and almost kind of welcoming the word vulnerability. Vulnerability has become something that is now a lot more acceptable in business. It's a lot more acceptable in life because it is a recognition that I'm okay to be not okay. And that is very much the very first step in actually addressing resilience and adaptability. And it is really about being adaptable in the face of challenges, stress, adversity, change in many ways, because a lot of people don't have a preference for change. Some people welcome it, but other people think, no, I like the status quo. I like just being normal, being in normality, being predictable in the work that I do and the person that I am. And so in marketing, resilience means kind of bouncing back from setbacks, learning from why those setbacks happened. We're going to go deeper into this. Staying useful under pressure. It's often called in psychological terms being in the grip when you're actually not useful, when you're under pressure, because maybe unhelpful behaviors or decision making or behavioral patterns kind of start to come into play and they might not be supporting you. And it's also about thinking clearly in those more challenging moments. And again, we'll look at some of the techniques you can use for that too. And it's also about continuing to learn rather than becoming stuck. One of the best parts of resilience is this continual personal development, really using it when something kind of, life or business or work or some, colleague or acquaintance throws something at you and it's like, oh, okay, I need to kind of catch this because this is an opportunity for me to develop. So rather than just trying to push it back or deny it or kind of, be really obstructive to it, it's about welcoming it in and saying, okay, this is not going to be comfortable necessarily. It might be, but I don't know till I've critiqued it. But it's actually about looking at it and thinking, okay, here's an opportunity for me to develop. That is, in lots of ways, that kind of second step beyond vulnerability, which is actually about accepting this inevitable thing that nothing is going to stay the same. And not pretending that it's all good, it's all fine, and sort of doing the ostrich thing, burying your head in the sand. That is not what we're doing here. We're actually opening ourselves up to welcome these changes, these opportunities to develop. And then, of course, this adaptability thing, which comes into play. And these two are kind of parallel opportunities, if you like. Resilience is one thing about the mindset, and adaptability is about kind of adjusting then how you respond. So it's your thinking, it's your behaviors, it's the priorities as things change. So your adaptability is your response to the change, to the challenge, to the thing that you're facing in front of you. And of course, this is going to be very closely linked to this continual learning, the openness, and how your ability to respond can be agile, I think is probably a really good word in here. The World Economic Forum has done a lot of research into this, and it highlights resilience, flexibility, and agility working together alongside things like creative thinking and lifelong learning as increasingly important, and it says capabilities, but I would say human capabilities, because as a lot of what we do becomes automated, becomes captured by, AI and agents and robotic kind of support, these are increasingly important human capabilities. And these are not random reactions. Adaptability is not just oh, well, I'll just kind of, blow in the wind and see what happens. This is a purposeful adjustment. So it's about being very mindful. I'm going to use this word quite a lot, I think, because being mindful means you're very conscious to what's going on. So you're awake to the opportunity. So it might not look comfortable. You see that path in front of you and you think, oh no, I can see what's coming. I can see what's going to happen. Things have changed and I'm not really kind of sensing this and I can feel a little bit awkward already. But it's about being conscious in those moments. It's not about pushing back and saying, I don't want that. It's about kind of being open to it, not necessarily proactively welcoming it, but just saying, okay, I can see there's something arriving here. I can see there's something changing. How do I feel about that? How do I reflect on that? Am I going to welcome this change and be adaptable to be a little bit more fleet of foot, a little bit more open to what the possibilities and the opportunities in here might be? That's a kind of mindset thing. And of course, it is a growth mindset. Our first theory here is about growth mindset. This kind of growth mindset idea shows that people are more resilient when they see capability as developable rather than fixed. So they actually see this as okay, I'm going to get something from this rather than, oh no, I've got to try and revert things back to something that's predictable. They actually look at it and say, actually, inside the unpredictability of what might happen here, is something that could actually be an opportunity. And so in practice, this means that feedback becomes information, not a threat. It means that change becomes a challenge to work through, not a proof of failure. And it means that I might have to then be adapting here to new tools and methods that I can actually learn from and maybe begin to what we call habit stack. So actually put these into my toolkit of, when something else changes in the future, I've got something more to work with. So, with a growth mindset, you know that you can change over time, and you'll get to a point, if you have this growth mindset, that you're always observant to this change, because it could be that actually it becomes a little bit fun. It could actually be, yeah, I kind of like the awkwardness in this. I like the fact I'm not quite sure what's going to happen or what the outcome might be. But actually, on that journey, we're going to have some fun with this because I'm going to play, I'm going to learn, I'm going to maybe try some new tools. I'm maybe going to collaborate, get others involved here. I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable, but we'll see how that feels. I mean, isn't this living? Isn't this actually being alive professionally and personally? Kind of is, isn't it, really, when you stop and think about it? And of course, we as modern marketers are often expected to be, very much dealing with stuff coming at us from all directions. There's a lot of pressure out there. We've got to be strategic and tactical at the same time. That's a bit tricky, isn't it? With one eye on the long term, one eye on today and what we're actually doing. We've got to be creative and analytical at the same time. So we've got to be producing beautiful outputs, but at the same time measuring those impacts of those outputs. We've got to be fast, but we've also got to be careful. So again, juggling this kind of opportunity to be innovative because marketing needs to break the mold. It needs to be better than the competition down the road there. But it also has got to do this in a diligent and careful way. And of course, we need to be human centered because we're doing people relationship building here, but we've also got to be commercially driven. So there's a lot of kind of stretch in there. And this does create role stretch. And for a lot of people, this is uncomfortable stuff. McKinsey notes that burnout, fatigue, and disengagement are consistently rising in the research that they're doing because organizations face constant change. And this pressure that we're feeling mustn't be then kind of put in the box of weakness, because it could be a sign that actually things are slightly broken or could be improved from process and systems and leadership and culture. Maybe the objectives aren't right, all of these kind of more practical things. But it could also be that we need to empower our people. And that starts with us as individuals. We need to be starting to think about, okay, if this is the real world, if this is actually what I'm facing, what here can I do about it? What are the opportunities in here for me? And it gets then quite interesting and quite exciting, because then really what it's saying is that resilience is not a tolerance to burnout. It doesn't mean that we are just going to accept things as tough or as broken or as high pressured, or as we often hear, and I bet you've said this as well, oh, today was really stressful. Well, actually, today wasn't really stressful, or yesterday, or whenever you said it, or whenever I said it. It was a series of opportunities. It was a series of moments. It was a series of pressures. Yes, it may be overload, it may be whatever. But those actually were just things. They were just what they were. It was our response to it that felt or that was perceived as stressful. And that's where burnout happens. So it's our perception of these things, not the things in their sort of little pockets, in their little isolated sort of definitions of what they are. Those are just things. It's our response to them that is the stressful perception of those things. And of course, there is a really important distinction here that if you are resilient, if you're able to identify these things, work with them, actually evolve and develop with them, it does help you to respond well. It doesn't mean you're going to say yes to everything because, hey, I'm resilient. So throw more at me. I can just cope with more. That's not what this is about. This is about saying, I'm just awake. I'm aware. I can actually challenge and push back on overload. I can say, I need a bit of a break here. I need a little bit of time out here from this situation. I'm actually up to full capacity. I'm not going to use the word busy, not going to use the word stressed. I'm just, look, here on my list, I'm up to full capacity. And this will have an impact. If I load myself with even more, or if I just try to do too much, or if I don't have a break, then burnout will happen. And the signs of that, obviously, and this is not rocket science because we'll all have felt this to a lesser or greater extent, is reduced concentration. You just know it. You're just not focused, are you, when you're feeling that early sign of burnout? You're going to become a little bit more cynical, maybe skeptical, maybe a little bit negative. You're going to probably be quite snappy, so short attention span and lower mood, all of those things will come in. And it will probably make you feel quite emotionally flat, or it'll be like, oh, I'm looking forward to the weekend. All of these things are going to really not be helpful to an optimum output or to an optimum enjoyment of your day. And of course, persistence in this, in other words, if you don't challenge this, if you don't wake up to this, will be optimally exhaustion. I mean, that is what is going to happen. You are going to burn out. So this is a really important thing to be recognizing early on. And so, one of the ways that we can do this is think about our psychological capital. This is a very practical kind of model. And it's a useful kind of interpretation in marketing because there's four things that will enable us to really recognize if some of this stuff is challenging us, or if we're kind of pushing ourselves just that little bit too far, or if actually we need to self adjust. And these are hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. And these are just kind of filters, if you like. They're not kind of things to tick off. They're not kind of, things to achieve, but they're just a kind of a way of interpreting a situation. And so these are kind of four definitions. With hope, it's I can see a way forward. Okay, yeah, that's good. That feels nice. Efficacy is I believe I can handle this. Doesn't mean you will, but you actually perceive you can handle it. The resilience is I can recover from setbacks. The recognition it won't be plain sailing, but I've got this is probably a simple way of defining that. And also optimism. I expect improvement is possible. So again, it's that growth mindset working with these four kind of little checkpoints. And if in your day to day you're not feeling all four of these, then that is a moment to then step out of the mix of what you're doing and say, right, I need to reflect on this. Is kind of, okay, now I'm awake to what's going on. What do I want to do about it? I'm not necessarily going to solve it or change it, but at least I've started to become aware that there's something up here. There's something that's kind of either pushing me just that little bit too far. And I'm going to be vulnerable here. I'm going to just say, okay, I need a little bit of time out. Obviously in sports, there are those moments in basketball and other sports where they just say time out and they just take that little break, that little pause for breath. And that is really, really positive because it allows you to then adjust. And it will allow you to take a little bit of psychological safety. This idea that you can just power on through no matter what you hear and see on social media. And there's just so much stuff that says, come on, be strong. Come on, have that positive mindset. No, this is an actual, a balanced way of psychologically looking at a situation, reflecting on how you feel and think about that situation, and admitting mistakes, asking some questions, testing those ideas, challenging any weak assumptions, and raising any risks early. This is going to give you a feeling of psychological safety because that doesn't mean that you're always comfortable. It doesn't mean you're always looking to revert everything back to normal. But what it does is it wakes you up to actual reality of what's going on. And that really, I think you're probably hearing already, is the fundamental point here about resilience and adaptability. It is that awareness and being awake to what's happening. So when people talk about, oh, I'm mindfully approaching this, that's actually what they're meaning. And when they say, yeah, I'm totally locked into, I'm dialed into this, that is what they're meaning. And this is so, so important because it's when you are uncertain, it's when you're not fully engaged with something that those little surprises can just kind of knock you off, that path that you're on, or can just kind of take you out of that psychological safety. So it really does matter. This being switched on is really important. And what we're finding here then, as we're going into this, is that more and more and more, this is actually about you. This is actually about you personally and me personally. This is about not saying, okay, my whole business is broken. This is not saying, oh, my team just isn't working. They're not working together well. Everybody's feeling the pressure. The atmosphere isn't what it used to be. This is about going inward. inside as an individual before taking this to an organizational level. So if you lead a team, if you've got people working for you, direct reports, or if you're part of a team, you've got colleagues who are looking like they're not really coping here. This is about doing this at an individual level first. And there's a really nice little model here called the ADKAR model, which is about awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And it's based on the principle that organizational change, and that can be down to just a couple of colleagues, it's not a big organization necessarily, but that change will succeed when individuals move through change successfully as individuals. So it doesn't mean we work in isolation, but it's about dealing with yourself first. It's about really understanding what's going on. Let me reflect on how I'm responding to this, how I'm feeling about this situation. And it might just be early signs. It might not be the significant stuff that's bringing everything down yet, but if we can spot those early signs at an individual level, then we can start to deal with the bigger picture. And so, if you're starting to lead yourself through this inevitable change that we're talking about, you can use this ADKAR model really, really simply by saying, okay, awareness, the first letter in the ADKAR acronym. Why is this change happening? Doesn't mean you've got to respond to it, but just understanding why are we changing? Why is this situation changing? Why is the market changing? Why are our team changing? Why are all our systems looking different? Why are things moving and changing? The D is for desire. What is my reason to engage with this? And that's a real kind of inward look to say, okay, am I up for this? Do I want to be part of this or do I want something completely different? Again, it's not about making final decisions, but it's about saying, okay, what is my reason to engage here? Because I have choice. I absolutely have choice. The vulnerability, the resilience, the adaptability is all choice. And it's your choice. It's not your boss's choice. It's not your spouse's choice. It's not your parents' choice. It's your choice. That desire to want to change and give yourself a reason to engage with this is yours. The K is for knowledge. What do I need to learn to enable myself to either respond or to understand more deeply why things are changing and what I could respond and how I could respond? What are my preferences here? What do I need to learn? The A is ability. What do I need to practice? So if I am going to respond to this change, what do I actually need to practice to actually make myself part of it or to get on a journey of development here or to maybe actually go ahead of others so I can actually bring others along with me? And the R is for reinforcement, coming up with some things that will help to make this stuff stick. So as this thing does change, it's not about just getting, sprinting for the finish line and then running out of steam. This is all about, okay, what's going to help me, help this to stick? Because if this change is inevitable and it's here to stay, and some things are, things like AI, for example, what do I need to help me to help to make this stick? And so there'll be a lot of things to kind of go through. So when I talk about reflection and just stopping and seeing this change in front of you and thinking, okay, what do I feel about this? Okay, what's going on behind the scenes to make this change happen? And what's my reason to engage with this? Do I really care? On the whole list of priorities of all these things that are changing, which are the ones that I really need or want to engage with more? And it's those kinds of self-reflections that enable you to become a much more kind of internally wise person. Now, for some of us, this is easy because we do a lot of self-reflection, this whole kind of going inward. It's called introspection, thinking about your thinking. It's a really, really useful self-development process. But for some of us, it's more of a challenge because we don't naturally go there. We live very much in the external world. But this is a really great way of just uncovering maybe some little opportunities and maybe some challenges that you might face in adapting to the change. And there are other kind of useful tools and models as well that will help you to kind of really feel involved in the change. Once you understand the need, once you then understand how you want to respond to this, then you can decide your level of involvement here. You can create clarity early. You can start to build some support here for what you need to actually work your way through this change, not just comply with it, not just follow the rules and do as you're told, but actually really learn about how this is feeling for you. And it's a really positive thing once you take ownership and accountability for this and realize it isn't your boss, it's not your partner, it's not your parents, it's not your best friend. This is actually about you and your choices, your decisions, your preferences. And it really is about owning this and communicating as you make some progress with those people I've just mentioned and maybe generate some small wins as you start to celebrate some stuff that you're doing that's actually, I never used to be as adaptable on this particular topic, but now I've actually found a way kind of through it because actually I'm just accepting it or I'm just becoming a little bit more vulnerable to it and then kind of figuring out for myself actually how I can respond in a more kind of thoughtful way. Even just those little steps, these are not huge, great, revolutions in your world. These are little evolutions, little micro moments that just enable you to get a little bit closer to really understanding yourself. That is what we're feeling here, I think. And resilient marketers, and you'll know these, when you spot somebody who is resilient, who kind of does this and seemingly does this in a really comfortable way, you'll spot them. They don't try to control everything. They separate signals from noise. They reprioritize and adapt really quickly. They communicate early. They ask for help before problems escalate. And they protect their energy as well as the output. What you're kind of seeing and feeling here is that they're not subservient to their situation. They're not just doing as they're told without challenging or without questioning. They're actually coming back. And by saying challenging and questioning, doesn't mean you've got to be obstructive. You're just looking for clarity. And that's what they're doing. A resilient marketer has clarity over a situation or a relationship or a project or an opportunity. And so this should be really thought of as something that is very much as part of a personal life development journey. And think about actually what you're good at in this list already and which ones do you really need to work on. This is a great reflection. Do you try to control everything? Or are there some things that actually you don't need to actually control? Letting them play out as they could or should maybe is a better way. Do you separate signal from noise? Do you actually understand the root cause of a situation or of a person or of a situation in a project or a campaign or, just your team dynamic or whatever it happens to be? Or do you just listen to the noise? You're just then swept along in this wave of issues and busyness and hectic, and you actually can't see the wood from the trees. That's where that saying kind of comes from. Can you prioritize things really quickly when something changes? Or do you kind of just think, nope, going to stick to our plan, not going to move anything? Because again, that might not be serving you. Do you communicate early? Or could that be something that you kind of raise maybe a concern, or maybe you ask some questions a little bit earlier than you would normally? That's a big one for me personally. I'll be open and honest here. A little bit of vulnerability from Neil here. That's an early one for me. I always try to self-solve stuff. I don't reach out. I don't communicate early. I don't communicate actually with colleagues and business partners and stuff particularly well anyway. So that one is a self-learning one for me. I could always communicate more quickly and earlier before things start to become a little bit too heavy. So that's one for me. Maybe it's not for you. Do you ask for help before problems escalate, or do you try and deal with it? Remember, vulnerability, asking for help is not an issue. A lot of people like to help people who have opened up and said, look, I'm really struggling here. Can you help me? Most people, and it really is most people, will be very supportive. They won't view you as weak. They will think, wow, that person owned up to it. Great. Yeah, I'm in to help here. And of course, that does build relationships and it builds their confidence that, hey, you're a team player. And again, in most businesses, that is a real positive. And also the protecting of energy as well as the output. It is not all about delivering the campaign or delivering the project or getting that next social media post out when you haven't actually got time to do it. It's also about balancing your energy with those outputs. So do you do that well, or is that something to be worked on? I love that little checklist for marketers there. It's a really helpful one. And of course, it does apply. This kind of thing applies across every single sector. It could be retail, B2B, higher education, healthcare, etc., etc., etc. Resilience is not sector specific. But it just really shows up in how quickly and intelligently people adjust. And we do see certain industries that you would say, wow, they're just very quick and adaptable because they've had to be, because over the years, change has been inevitable. And some industries, some sectors, you could argue, are kind of a little bit more set in their ways because change has not been part of their kind of makeup. It's just not how we've been. We've been quite steady as an industry, really changed in the last 100 years. You often hear that in steady industries, but change is inevitable. And of course, with things like AI, the macro environment that we're in right now, the economy, every single sector is going to experience change. So it is coming to you whether you think you're in an industry or a sector that is affected or not. So be ready and aware and start to practice some of this stuff. And really, this stuff is coming at you to challenge your ability to react or to reflect on uncertainty. So there's this underlying thing that's going on here. When we're talking about resilience and adaptability, dead easy to do when things are certain. Because you can kind of predict and foresee a likely outcome to a campaign, a project, a relationship, a challenge that comes to your business. You can kind of know what's going to happen because probably you or others have been there before. But when it's uncertain, when you're not really, really clear as to, well, one, why it's happened, so obviously that's the baseline for it, but also what is likely to now happen and play out in front of us, then that's what we're really focusing on here if you want to take this up to the next level. So we're going to try and reduce overwhelm, particularly during uncertainty, because of course that overwhelm makes us feel less resilient, makes us feel less adaptable, and is a scary place to be. Doesn't necessarily help with anxiety levels, with well-being and performance as well. So a simple response pattern here to reduce overwhelm when you feel a little bit uncertain as to what's happening or what's going to play out is to pause, to prioritize, to reframe, to act, and to review. Okay, very, very simple little checklist here. And it is worth noting these down because this is going to be your friend at any point in your career, in fact, any point in your life when something is going to be very uncertain in front of you. So you pause. The pause, even if it is just pause for breath, take a breath. You hear this phrase a lot, don't you? That stops the emotional spiral. Because most people will then get into this loop, this little mini tornado in their mind. Oh no, this might happen. Or, and you start to spin. That is what you're doing. The pause stops the emotional spiral. It just says, and pause and relax. Because then you can go to prioritize, which is identifying what matters now. And you see people, emergency responders, for example, in a crisis situation, a big accident or something like that. Their first thing is to triage the incident. They want to know because they're going to assess the situation. They're going to say, okay, right, the priority is here, it's not over there. The priority is this person, not that person, for reasons whatever, whatever. But what they're doing is they're identifying what matters right now. What do I need to deal with first? And that gives you a sense of control. So you're going to reduce overwhelm instantly by doing that. So you've paused. You've then prioritized what matters right now. And then the third thing is reframing. Ask what has changed and what hasn't. Because what you're doing as a human here, again, to stop this cognitive load of, oh, everything has changed. My whole world has fallen apart because of this certain situation. Well, actually, it hasn't, has it? Not really. This thing has happened, but actually, the rest of the world has just carried on. So there is this kind of sense of reality here if you ask and reframe what has changed, but what is still there that's predictable and safe. Because that gives you a sense of, okay, there is somewhere I could step aside to if I needed to. Again, maybe if I need to repause, take another pause for breath and stop maybe an emotional spiral, which is now starting to spin in the background. Reframe it. What's changed, but what's not? Gives you that ability then just to say, okay, I still got this. I'm okay. And then the fourth point is act, taking one sensible next step. Because if this is an uncertain situation, Okay, could be major, could be small. But if you take one sensible next step based on knowing what's changed and what hasn't, having identified what matters right here, right now, and having stopped that emotional spiral, that next first step is going to be a sensible step, just by definition. It's going to be something that will help the situation and will still give you a sense of, okay, I'm in control. I'm feeling vulnerable. I'm scared. I'm not feeling in a good place. My heart rate's up. My breathing isn't. Oh, I need to pause. Right. Go through it again. Okay. Right. I've got the breathing back now. My next step is, okay, it's to there and it's to there. And then the final point in this 5 point thing, this pause, prioritize, reframe, act, and review, learning and adjusting. So you've taken that first step. Okay. Where are we now? And so actually what you're doing is you're going back through this as a cycle. And it can look then very calm and ordinary rather than dramatic. This process actually is about calming you, calming the situation, and just not over responding. It means you can respond, but you're not over responding. And if you don't over respond, you don't feel overwhelmed. Okay, so we could treat this in a major kind of crisis incident, and of course, it will apply significantly there. But it's great to practice these kind of little tools and techniques when you've actually got just a simple little moment of uncertainty. And it could be something very simple and innocuous, and that's a good time to practice this. Because once this becomes, this is how I respond when I'm feeling uncertain or when something changes dramatically, I'm ready. Of course, this is great to practice in small steps so that you get it right in a small, manageable way so that you've got the habits that will genuinely help when things go significantly wrong. So think about just for a minute then, what habit do you think would make the biggest difference to your steadiness? We're not looking to establish here just like a sort of a ground zero and all, I'm kind of flatlining all my work. We want to live, we want to enjoy stuff. We want to maybe embrace a little bit of uncertainty because it can be exciting, it can be fun. What we're trying to do here, though, is being mindful and saying, okay, that can be fun to a point, but it's when it goes beyond that point that actually it's uncomfortable. So this is where we're putting these habits into play. And practical habits include probably setting some clear priorities. It might be putting some boundaries around being constantly responsive. And I think most of us know that, don't we? If we're being honest. Always saying yes to things when they're sent towards us. Okay, that's a good one. Regular reflection points. That is where I'm just going to take a brief moment out. I'm just going to pause, think how this is going. Just reflect. That's always key as well. Asking for the clarification early, skills renewal, constantly being hungry and like a sponge for new skills and knowledge and experience. That is really key here. And also, obviously, a great habit is this protecting sleep, recovery, and attention to you. Actually, not just saying, well, I can build recovery in at the weekend because no, we're talking about recovery every day. And in fact, actually, at multiple moments during the day, the little timeouts that we talked about before, this builds resilience and adaptability, really strong habits and behaviors. And hopefully, these will become preferences for you. And it'll enable you then to communicate well, both with yourself, but also with others. Because when uncertainty is really high, be honest about what's known, be clear about what is not yet known, link work to purpose, focus people on their next actions, and avoid over positivity, over reassuring when that certainty that you're kind of trying to project actually isn't possible. So it's actually being truthful and honest. That is what we're talking about here. So if you are part of a team or you're leading a team where suddenly something is crisis or suddenly something happens, or you've just as a team got to a point where, we've got to deal with this now because enough is enough, then it's about being honest. It's about communicating really, really clearly. Because in uncertainty, what we should do is affirm our capability, what we can handle, what we need to do without giving false hope. That is the key here. And this also applies, as we're already seeing, internally. So if we're being mindful, if we're reflecting, it is about being super, super honest and not just being, as I said before, this kind of rah-rah positive. That's of no use to anybody because that's a delusion. So resilience and adaptability is where there's real honesty in the reflection and the communication. because people then can trust it and you can trust it because it's like, okay, I'm being honest. I'm sharing on a scale of 1 to 10 just how vulnerable I'm feeling right now. And it's at this level, and that's okay. Because that is what it is. It's not about saying, oh, no, 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 I'm okay. I'm actually feeling 3 out of 10, but I'm going to project that I'm 8 out of 10. I'm fine. It's not helping you or anybody else to work with you. So honesty is key. Hopefully, I've got that one across to you. So if you're in a kind of a management or kind of leadership role, and it is about helping to create psychological safety. It is about this real honesty. It's about reducing ambiguity. Because if people kind of know that something has changed, if they know that there are some real uncertainties and challenges, but actually there's a very clear path through, we might not get it right, but it's not ambiguous. It's not, oh, we might go over there, or we might take this choice, or it might be today, or it could be next week. Actually reducing ambiguity helps to people for people to kind of buy into the journey. The journey might not be correct, and that almost doesn't matter because you're all in it together. That will build resilience as a team. Pacing change sensibly as well, because just understanding the people around you and how they adapt to change. If you're full of change embracing and your colleagues and your team is and everything else, then that's okay. You can just go for it. But most people work in a balanced team where some people adapt to change because they welcome it, and other people like normality. And we're all on a spectrum. We are all absolutely on a spectrum. So understanding how people are going to be feeling when change, which could be quite significant, is coming into play is really, really important. And what we're not doing here is we're not rewarding constant firefighting. What we're doing is we're saying, right, we're going to work together. We know this change is here. We're going to define it as best we can, but we're going to go on this continual journey in a specific direction, but we're going to adapt as we go. But we're not just going to be dashing around and trying to solve lots of little fires and kind of like, oh, we're in a crisis. And we're going to actually use that as a definition to panic. It's the opposite of this that we're actually defining here. Because a lot of the mistakes that we see when we're kind of, looking deeper into this, or when you're actually reflecting on how does my team deal with all of this stuff, is that a number of common mistakes are treating resilience as a silent endurance race. It's like, oh, to be resilient, I just got to slowly, steadily, knuckle down and do this, or I've got to just, I'm not going to admit to anything. I'm going to burn the midnight oil. I'm going to work late. I'm just going to, no, that is a big, big mistake, as we've seen a number of times here already. And expecting adaptability without support. You cannot expect either yourself or others to be adaptable if their support infrastructure is not in place. And that is giving people enough time. It's about giving them enough resources. It's about taking time for yourself. And it is about that kind of pacing in a sensible way. It's not about we've got to hit that deadline, so we all have to sprint despite everything we know to be correct. It's about saying that's not achievable. So, how are we going to actually adapt and change things to either make it achievable or to reset our goal? And again, for a lot of businesses, this is going to be a real mindset change because we haven't been doing it. Confusing busyness with effectiveness. And I think we've all been there, and I think we all know people who continue to do that on a day-to-day basis. You're not effective if you're busy. The word busy just implies that you are dashing around doing too much and you're not focused and you're not doing it mindfully because you are subservient to that busyness. And it is not effectiveness. And a lot of people confuse being busy with being effective. It is about being mindfully efficient and effective. That is what we're talking about here. Also, rolling out change without context. Just expecting yourself to change without doing any of these techniques, without reflecting on why the change is necessary and how much buy-in you have to that change is going to end in defeat. It really is. You're not going to feel good about it, and you're not going to get to a great end point. So understanding the context of that change, why is it there? What resources, what abilities do I have? What support can I have? That's also important as well. Also, another one as well is a common mistake is assuming that confidence means there's no struggle. No, it doesn't at all. Just because somebody, could be you or I, present as being confident doesn't mean that there's an internal struggle. There could very well be more going on under the hood. And that is what I'm constantly talking about here. It's about balancing the reality with what is presenting. So it's about balancing the reality of the change or the issue or the challenge that you've got there with actually what's going on. And it's also about doing it internally with yourself. Another key thing there is really, really important is this alignment of the reality with the perception. So no matter what you're perceiving the thing to be or how you're feeling, the reality could be a different story. So let's uncover that truth and then we can move forward confidently. And the final one there is ignoring recovery. I've worked over the years in businesses and with clients who literally do not value recovery at all. It is all about playing hard and working hard. That is such a, well, I was going to say even last decade thing or mindset. It's not. It's way, way back beyond that. But there are still people and there are still organizations who really reward ignoring recovery. It is so, so vital to maintain peak performance. You just ask any athlete or any successful professional sports team, if you ask them, how much do you reward recovery? And they will all, without any exception at all, put recovery higher than the actual training and the level of fitness and the level of technical expertise because it's in recovery that the magic happens. It's not actually in the training. Your body adjusts to the training in the recovery periods. It's not actually in the training. People go to the gym and think, oh, I'm going to get strong in the gym. You don't. Your body actually rebuilds and gets strong in the recovery after going to the gym. And we can take that mindset into our business or into our marketing because the same will be true. And that's what I'm saying is in that recovery time, that's when you're reflecting, when you're just taking that little pause and, thinking, what actually happened there? Can I pick the pieces of this and how I responded and what happened? And he said and she said, and look where we got to. Good or bad or indifferent doesn't really matter. It's just a reflection on what's going on. So the goal is not to become endlessly absorbent. The goal is to stay effective and well enough to keep contributing at the best possible level you can. That's the key. So let's see if we can identify then, to round all this up, a personal resilience plan. What can you do next? Well, I would suggest by asking yourself these questions. What pressures are most affecting me? What can I influence directly? What do I need to learn next? Who can support me? What early signs must I not ignore? And what one habit will I strengthen this month? And you could then maybe choose something, one thing, one small change that would make you more adaptable, maybe in the next week or maybe in the next 30 days. Because that will be the first of these kind of habit stacking preferences or habits or skills or just mindset shifts, really, that will enable you to become more resilient and adaptable. So if you ask yourself those questions and just give yourself a really honest answer, remember, honesty is the key here when you're reflecting, you will take those next steps forward. So the key takeaways, I'm hoping now you have got these noted down and you're ready now to take these on yourself. Modern marketing roles demand more than just technical skill. We know that. I mean, it's clear, isn't it? We are humans working in a human hybrid stroke AI world now. Modern marketers require emotional steadiness, learning agility, and sensible self-management. They're not the least pressured. Strongest marketers are not the least pressured, but they're the most able to adapt without losing judgment at any point, remaining healthy, and staying true to their purpose. So, what I'd like you to think about, and maybe position resilience as this as you go forward, is that resilience itself is a muscle that every organization and each employee will need going forward. And that absolutely starts with you.